Hello and welcome to the Hibs Observer briefing on this Monday afternoon with myself, Liam Bryce, joined by Patrick McPartlin. To look back at some, pretty significant news out of Easter Road over the weekend. Hibs have added forward Thibault Klidje to their attacking ranks from Luzerne and breaking the club transfer record in the process. Quite a significant moment for the club, all things told. So we're going to have a look, kind of analyse the significance of that, obviously, look at what Klidje will bring to the team as well. First of all, though, as always, just a wee word for our sponsor. The Hibs Observer is brought to you by S1 Jobs. If it's time to hand in your transfer request, then head over to s1jobs.com and upload your CV today. With thousands of jobs across Edinburgh and the surrounding area, you'll find the one at S1 Jobs. So start your search today. So, Patrick, a big moment for Hibs, a big moment in the transfer window, adding Thibault Klidje to the ranks. We knew that Hibs, were on the lookout for a striker. It was kind of needed after the end of last season, with Dwight Gale retiring, Mikola Kukarevich going back to Swansea, and then signing for Slovan Bratislava. So, kind of early days. But what have you managed to find out about the new man so far? What can you tell us? What's your reaction to the significance of this signing?
I think the most interesting thing, first of all, is just how well Hibs managed to keep this under wraps. I think there was obviously a time when, it felt like people were very aware of what Hibs were doing or what they were working on well in advance of the kind of final stages of it. That certainly seems to have been nipped in the bud. Now it just sort of very much out of the blue on a quiet Sunday morning that I think took just about everybody by surprise. But you made a good point there. Hibs have certainly needed to bring in attacking reinforcements because of the loss of Dwight Gale and Mikola Kukarevich from last season's squad. I think when you look at how David Gray has kind of turned Martin Boyle into this, I suppose basically a centre forward rather than a winger, and what Kieran Bowie can bring after like a kind of full pre-season. You've still got Ellie Yuan there. You've got Josh Campbell, Junior Hoylett, people can play that sort of position. But it did feel like there was a big kind of gap for a striker who, I suppose, just a penalty box striker, just someone not necessarily kind of that you wouldn't have had the recruitment team thinking we need to bring in like another Mikola Kukarevich, we need to bring in another Dwight Gale. It's about bringing in a kind of profile that's going to complement the strikers who are already there, and also as we know, David Gray loves flexibility. So is it somebody who can play in different formations? Can they play different positions? Can they be flexible? And I suppose can they help him sort of at least continue, kind of build on what we had last season, if not improve. And I think when you're shelling out over 7 figures to bring somebody in from the Swiss league, where they got Ellie Yuan from as well, so there's that kind of that similarity there with it's a league that Hibs have had success in getting players from before. And it's significant, breaking the club transfer records. I think the Gordon family have kind of been hinting for a while that, they're prepared to do that. They're prepared to put in a little bit more money to, get players who, can help take Hibs to the next level. And I think from looking at Thibault Klidje's kind of stats, his sort of history and the sort of season he had with Luzerne last year, I think it feels like one of those signings where there's probably still a little bit of development there, but quite a high ceiling as well. And I think it's quite an exciting signing. I think looking at how he played for Luzerne last season, it's probably going to be a centre forward role rather than playing out wide. But as I said before, it's really just bringing somebody in who can play anywhere across the front. And with the club competing in Europe and hoping to build on last season's third place finish, then you need options up front, and you need flexibility, you need variety. And I think in Klidje, Hibs have got exactly that.
Yeah, exactly. And as you said, it's a player with only 24. Definitely more to come from him. I think you're kind of, as you said there, you're looking for a sort of penalty box striker. I think, from the kind of little of I'm sure none of us have had all that much time to really kind of look at him in depth as yet, but he kind of looks like a guy who's going to be on the end of things. A guy who takes up good positions, knows where to be in the box, decent goal scoring record over at Luzerne. He first came to Europe with Bordeaux. Had played for their B team, a few appearances for the first team before going to Luzerne. I think he would have played again. He could have played against Hibs in that Europa Conference League tie a couple of years ago if it weren't for injury. But he's found his way to Easter Road one way or another. And I think, again, you had the quotes from the Luzerne sporting director on our website today saying it was kind of his expressed wish to come to Hibs. He was going into the last year of his contract over there, so it's obviously a move that's really excited him, and he seems to go with the the best wishes of everybody at Luzerne. So I mean, it's definitely an exciting one, and just to place it into the context of the summer as well, I think, as we've touched on there, and we've touched on kind of multiple times already over the past few weeks, the importance of adding options to that forward line with the Europa League qualifier against Midtjylland coming up. I think to have another option in, to have another body, it's the sort of the circumstances surrounding this signing, the club record, guy coming in with a good reputation. It lifts people, it lifts the fans. Just it creates general excitement. So it's a generally good all round boost, I think, ahead of this game in just about every kind of aspect you can think of. Adding to the squad, as I said, keeping the mood around the fans. I mean, I'd imagine he's done some sort of pre-season over there. We don't know if he's going to come straight in to the side. Hibs have always been quite careful under David Grayers to not rush guys into action before they're ready. But it is a kind of one that sort of lifts things, and it kind of creates a bit of momentum in the transfer window as well. It's just an all-round exciting move, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think you consider who Hibs have already brought in. They brought in Raphael Salinger, they brought in Jamie McGrath, brought in Josh Mulligan. So you've got two players who know the league very well. They were standouts for their club last season to varying extents. In Salinger, you brought somebody in who has that European experience, good stats in the Austrian top flight last season as well. And I think it's just about kind of getting that mix of players who understand the league, but also who will bring something positive to the dressing room. Obviously, keeping the likes of Junior Hoylett, Rocky Bushiri has also been a real boost for Hibs. And I think it's the big thing this season has been, or this summer, sorry, is not making wholesale changes for next season. It's just about trying to keep as much of what you've got and then adding to it where you need to. And I think, one of the things for me is, there were times last season, even with Martin Boyle, there were times that Hibs, they weren't the quickest up top. And I think that's again something that Klidje will bring, is just that kind of electric pace. And, that's the sort of thing, if you're bringing him on for the last 15, 20 minutes, especially in Europe, that could be a bit of a game changer, that sort of thing. But I think as well with, with the lack of kind of transfer rumours, because, they have put a lid on the leaks that were coming out of Easter Road and East Mains in previous seasons, there's not been an awful lot to go on. There's been a couple of rumours here and there, and it's never really sort of left social media, apart from just a sort of slightly spurious Twitter account with however many followers suggesting that Hibs are signing player X or they're interested in player Y. So I think a lot of the chat recently has been about Nectar Triantis, will he, won't he? And yeah, the more that sort of drags on, and the fact that he played for Sunderland in their friendly in the weekend, I think people start getting a little bit kind of downhearted and they think, oh, he's not coming back. So something like this, as you say, it kind of lifts the fan base. It's exciting. It's it's a very interesting signing just because of his ceiling, because of his his past, and how he's sort of gone from sort of being a top performer for Bordeaux's B team to, I think he maybe had like a handful of chances in the first team. They were relegated, and he was moved on, did enough to impress Luzerne. And then, again, just a sort of slightly disrupted first season. I think he got an injury in the April. I think it was a knee injury that kind of kept him out until I think it was sort of mid-October 2023, which, as you mentioned earlier, was why he didn't face Hibs in Europe in that season. But I think Hibs have sort of made a bit of a habit of bringing in players who have either lost their way a little bit, or who just kind of need a sort of bit of a platform to really develop. And I think when you look at David Gray's comments, saying he's still got some development in him, looking at his stats, and it has been a very sort of cursory glance, because there hasn't been an awful lot of time since since Hibs announced the signing and this video that we're doing. But I mean, talk about him being a penalty box striker. There is room for improvement. I think decision making seems to be something that could be worked on. But I think for me as well, it's just that he spent a lot of time playing in a front two last season for Luzern, which will have, I think, probably caught the Hibs recruitment team's eye. I think just having somebody, we know how good Hibs are with crosses into the box. We know how much that's part of their game plan, and we know that if they want to go direct, they can. I don't think you'd be playing Klidje if you were going direct, but it gives them another dimension up front, just that pace. Those counter attacks that we've come to see on a regular basis from Hibs. It just seems like that's the sort of the style of play that he'll thrive in. So I think really really interested to see how he kind of adapts to Scottish football, how he kind of takes to it. We have seen some players take a bit of time to adapt, but I think when you're spending that sort of money on a player, you're sort of fairly confident that they can hit the ground running. And I think just having somebody who's going to attack through the channels is exactly what Hibs have been missing. So without putting too much pressure on Thibault, I think it is an exciting signing, and I think it'll be interesting to see where David Gray sort of views him as being most dangerous, because he can play out wide, but it does look like he's been brought in very much as a centre forward. So it's I think quite exciting times to be a Hibs fan. You look at who they're bringing in, and you look at the the potential for them. They've already broken the transfer record once. I think the way that the Scottish game is changing, you look at the investment at Aberdeen, you look at what's happening at Hearts. I think there is more of a kind of a focus on trying to sort of challenge the status quo and sort of take steps forward, and not just sort of have like one good season out of 7 or 8 where you might finish third and get into Europe, but just sort of make that a kind of regular feature. Not just for Hibs but for other clubs as well. And I think speculate to accumulate, isn't it? You bring in somebody like this who can help you get to the next level, and then you see where that takes you, and then you sort of build from there. So I think it's going to be fascinating to see how he adapts to Hibs, what role he plays, who he's going to play up top with, and whether or not he'll be a starter to begin with, or like with many players, whether David Gray has his preferred starting 11, and then it's about who can come in, who can disrupt. There's places there to be taken. I mean, I think we've seen so far from David Gray quite ruthless. If somebody's not performing, he will take them out of the team. But also quite loyal, and that if somebody is performing, then he won't just drop them at the first sign of the sort of player they've replaced coming back. So, just that sort of that competition for places, keeping the dressing room, positive and sort of in good spirits, and I think just like a really fascinating signing. Maybe a sign that Hibs are serious about kind of going to the next level.
Yeah. It's, to go and break your transfer record, I think that's the first Scottish team as we talked about, to spend, north of £1 million. Well, Scottish team not called Celtic or Rangers, need to add on that caveat. It goes all the way back to 1995, I believe. So it's, it's a pretty significant moment. It's a kind of statement of intent for Hibs. Kind of shows you whether they want, they're kind of serious about sustained improvement, taking the team to the next level. It's kind of putting your money where your mouth is, really, instead of just kind of sort of talking about it. It's kind of actually putting that into practice. I think in terms of the squad, all the talk has been about Nectar Triantis this summer, understandably so. But I think I've argued that getting another body in at the top end of the pitch was probably more of a priority at this point than kind of getting than anywhere else on the pitch, really, to be honest, because as we saw last season, David Gray went with 2 forwards. The vast majority of games, kind of slight wee tweaks here and there in pre-season, but again, it's broadly similar setup. If you're going to do that, you need extra options, and to have only kind of really, to be going in with just maybe Kieran Bowie and Martin Boyle into European qualifiers, there's a chance that it leaves you a wee bit short. We always obviously saw young Dean Cleland get a chance in pre-season. Ellie Yuan played up there as well, but obviously, he came off injured in that game last week. He's still looking to, he's been off the pitch for a long, long time. Really, it's going to take him time to get back to anywhere near peak fitness. So yeah, as we said, I kind of really exciting all round for Hibs, exciting development, and just give everybody a bit of lift going into those European games. Kind of as for Nectar Triantis, you mentioned there, Patrick, that he featured for Sunderland in their first pre-season outing at the weekend. But I mean, I've seen a wee bit of maybe kind of, some kind of pessimistic takes on that and where that leaves Hibs and what's going on there. But I mean, I don't think anything, I'm featuring for Sunderland, for me, doesn't really change anything. The Sunderland manager was asked about it afterwards, and he said for Nectar, he had a good season last season. He plays to understand exactly, and then we'll decide for everyone. So it kind of sounds like, so as you were for that, I don't think for you, does anything really change? It looks as though Sunderland are prepared to have a look at him. He wants to go in there, as we know, and try and impress. So, I mean, I wouldn't be any more up nor down on that based on the developments of the weekend. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it's what you expect. I mean, we've seen it with Hibs before in the past. Players will play a part in pre-season, and then sometimes during pre-season or shortly after, then they'll head out on loan. It's sometimes it's about bodies, it's about numbers. I believe he was playing as a centre back for Sunderland, so that's in itself that's sort of quite quite unusual given that he was so successful as a midfielder for Hibs last season. But I think you could even look at who Hibs took to the Netherlands with him in their pre-season training camp, and the fact that they took Dean Cleland and now he's gone on loan to East Kilbride along with Freddie Owens. That was about numbers. It was about having bodies to be able to do what you want to do. So I think we've known for some time that it's the saga. We're calling it a saga officially. It is the kind of thing that could run on. Gray was sort of quite, I think, firm when he was speaking at the Dutch training camp and saying, they don't want to hang around forever. So from Nectar's point of view, you can kind of think, why would you not want to try and force your way into the plans and then, give the manager something to think about rather than just say, okay, I'm, how that on loan again. There's obviously that sort of will he, won't he for Australia or Greece. So he's still sort of got that to think about. But, you never know what can happen in pre-season. And, things can happen, and it could be that there is a place for him in the squad, and he's told that he is going to play, fairly regularly, even in the first half of the campaign. In which case, you'd imagine Hibs would look to move on from that, because I think you talk about them needing a striker. I think that's accurate, but I think they are missing a sort of Triantis type figure from that midfield, whether it's him, whether it's somebody else. They do need somebody of that ilk in the middle of the park, and that could make the difference not only in Europe but in domestic fixtures as well. So it is kind of a balancing act when we're thinking, from the Hibs point of view, how long can they afford to give it, in the hope that it might still happen, or do they just say, we can't afford to wait around any longer. We need somebody in so they can gel with the rest of the team so you can hit the ground running, that sort of thing. Because ultimately it's about the team rather than the individual. And I think it's always difficult when it's a lone player. There's a reason why they say never fall in love with a lone player, because you get to situations like this where it's it's very much kind of uncertain and unclear what they're going to do. But I don't think it was any great surprise to see him feature at the weekend. I think we all expected that. Same with the social media posts. He's going to be posting bits and pieces from pre-season, and I think it's I think it probably does come down to him and his decision. And at the moment, I think he maybe he feels he can still give the manager at Sunderland something to think about. It's just I suppose for him the kind of main thing is thinking about how long does he give it to try and force his way into the plans, and how does he sort of marry that with how long does he give it before saying, actually, I will go back to Hibs because I know I'm going to play and I'll get another season under my belt. As the player, and his agents will be advising him the same. You don't want to get to a situation where you're not going to be playing regularly. You need to get that guaranteed game time. So, whilst Hibs at some point will have to say, we need to move on, depending on what he's doing, Triantis himself will probably have to think, right, I need to make a call on this because, I can guarantee sort of starting every week or twice every week if you're in Europe and domestic cups, that sort of thing. So yeah, it does feel a bit like one of those situations where somebody's got to blink first. And I think at this case, at this point in time, we don't know what who's going to blink first. We don't know what the future holds. And I suppose that's the uncertainty. That's what the club has to kind of think about. The club has to come first. They have to put a deadline on it, even if not publicly, and then just kind of work around that. And if they haven't got a definitive answer one way or another, then that's when they have to move on. But we know David Gray likes him. We know he fits in well with the squad. So that might be one that just sort of runs on a little bit more.
Yeah, as it's starting to get all the hallmarks of a saga now, to be honest with you. I think it is deserving of that label.
Absolutely.
But for now, we're going to leave it there, folks. Thank you for joining us to discuss Hibs' new record signing. Exciting times at Easter Road as we build towards that Europa League qualifier against Midtjylland in now 10 days' time. But for now, thank you, as always, for joining us. We'll speak to you again very soon. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Cheers.